Good morning. Happy Tuesday. We are glad that you're joining us for the Bible study today. We hope that you're doing well. Today, as we continue in our sermon theme and Lenten theme of O Me of Little Faith, we're looking at a very confusing, difficult text that is quite difficult to reconcile and difficult to kind of put faith in. Numbers 21, 4-9.
From Mount Or, the Israelites set out by the way to the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. But the people became impatient on the way. The people spoke against God and against Moses. "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no food and no water, and we detest this miserable food." The Lord sent poisonous serpents among the people, and they bit the people, so that many Israelites died. The people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord to take away the serpents from us." So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, "Make a poisonous serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten shall look at it and live." So Moses made a serpent of bronze and put it upon a pole, and whenever a serpent bit someone, that person would look at the serpent of bronze and live.
Thank you, Bonnie. So a difficult and confusing
Absolutely.
text. But part of that, I think, is because we don't have the full context when we only look at 4-9.
Right.
And as with any part of the Bible, if you don't have the whole context, it often doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so context is everything, as we know. But still, we get an Old Testament, almost vindictive view of God, and that's why I said it's often a difficult text to reconcile, to put faith in, to know how to make sense of.
Right.
So it's confusing. But if we put it in that full context, we don't see quite the vindictive God that would send these poisonous serpents to bite people and kill them. We see a God who, in Numbers 20 even, Moses and Aaron went to God, and God told them to strike the rock, and then water abundantly came out, provided for the people, provided for the livestock, and God did that before their eyes. So we can maybe look at this and see kind of a petty, vindictive God who, but in the full context, you have a God who delivered his people from slavery in Egypt, was providing daily manna for them, was leading them to the promised land, had been doing miracles among them, and they kept doubting.
Right.
And they kept wanting to go back to this unabundant life that they had before.
Well, and the thing was, in their minds, the life they had before was a wonderful life. It was so much better than being stuck out in the wilderness. And what again, I have often said this, the Israelites are my people.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't long, God rescued them from the Pharaoh, from oppression, and took them out. And they were just barely through the Red Sea, out of Egypt, and they started to complain. There's no water here. There's no food here. They just started to complain. Now, we have to remember why God took them out into the wilderness as well, is that God is really trying to form them into a community, into God's people. They are the chosen people who will bear witness to God and the might that God has. So God has to do whatever it takes, really, to get them to understand how powerful God really is. And they just, as you said, they doubt God, they doubt Moses, they doubt the leaders all along the way. And it doesn't bode well for them because of that.
And you said God does whatever it takes to form them. And I think that's kind of a key statement, that I don't know what would be best. God using pain and suffering to lead us to healing and new life, or I certainly don't think it would be better for us to be some kind of puppet that God just snaps some divine finger and we become obedient.
Right.
I don't know that we would want that.
Oh, no.
And that wouldn't be a relational God.
Right.
And so we see God dealing with stubborn, complaining people again and again throughout the Bible. And the methods that God used seem often harsh and vindictive, but really they're all about turning people toward God, toward life, toward love and wholeness and community. But the problem is those methods often involve pain, death, suffering, just painful lessons.
Well, and we have to remember that for the Israelites, this was about, they were living in a time where there were multiple gods. And especially in Egypt, they lived among people who believed in multiple gods. And so they too would lean toward that, having these multiple gods. And so God has to, and in the Old Testament, the way that God's, and that's a small letter G, the way that gods showed their power was through might and fighting and winning for the people. And the people would do what the gods asked them to do, and the gods would prove their might through that. And that's basically what God is doing. God is saying, I'm going to show you and everyone else that I am the God, the only God. But I have to do it the way you understand. And I have to do it through might. I have to do it sometimes with poisonous snakes. I have to do it in the way you understand.
Right.
And that it would be good that the people reconcile themselves to going, oh, this is truly the only God. But all along the way, this is later in Numbers. And they are still questioning.
Yeah. And ironic how God went from being kind of a God who would display divine power through might, through miraculous acts of parting the sea or sending plagues, causing the Israelites to be able to stand up against Canaan or whatever it may be. And then in the New Testament, we find God becoming weak, becoming vulnerable in Jesus, displaying, we've talked about this a lot in Lent, displaying power through weakness.
Right.
And so it is an odd dichotomy.
Right.
And I think it's okay to acknowledge and name that too.
Right. And I think that the reversal, if there is a reversal, it's still the same God.
Still the same God.
Still the same God the whole way through. It's just God presenting God's self in a little bit of a different way. And the reversal is that the people had really clung to this a God of power and might, and so now God had to say, okay, wait, the pendulum swung too far the other way.
Right.
Now we need to, there is grace and there is love. Because, as some people say, well, the Old Testament, I don't want to read it because it's just full of this kind of stuff. Well, it's full of grace. Because even here, where there are poisonous serpents, God gives them the way out.
Right.
God saves them.
Yes.
And that happens over and over and over again in the Old Testament. So we have to look at the story about how God's grace comes and God saves them. And that's what's happening in the New Testament as well.
Yeah.
But the vehicle for saving may look different because the people's mindsets are different.
Well, even in the Gospel of John, the author of the Gospel of John found an allegory in this passage of Numbers. Just as Moses lifted up the serpent, so too you must look at the Son of Man. It's as if John was saying, look at death, face it, look at it, and then live. Don't turn away.
Right.
And in that, we kind of have a parable within the book of Numbers. We can take it very literally, and that's fine. But we often would get caught up in what God did to a people who only seem to be complaining about not having enough water and food.
Mm-hmm.
We need to move beyond that literal story that we have, and we need to look at it as almost a parable about suffering and death leading to life.
Right.
Healing coming through pain.
Right.
God forming people, and again, foreshadowing Jesus.
I love in the Lutheran Church the theology of the cross, because it means you cannot go to the empty tomb without first going through the cross.
Right.
You can't.
Yeah.
So you have to look death square in the face and realize that Jesus died.
Yeah.
In his humanity, Jesus died. And for a whole day on Saturday, Jesus was dead.
Was dead.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't pretty it up. We can't say he was somewhere else having tea and whatever.
Yeah.
Jesus was dead. And so it is that sense of, to get to life, you have to look squarely at death.
Right. That's exactly what the people did. The people had died, but those who had become bit and were going to die, being told, look up at this bronze serpent, look up at this symbol of death and live.
Yes.
And again, taking in only that, taken at face value, that doesn't add up. But if we put it in the context of looking at death to find life and knowing what Jesus would come to do on earth, then we begin to see something deeper. And it's why Numbers is put in the middle of Lent, paired along with John 3, making that connection between Jesus being lifted up on a pole, in a sense, and us facing that to live. And, Bonnie, I don't know quite how to explain what facing it and not turning away means, except that you kind of alluded to it. Our theology means that we don't bypass Good Friday.
Exactly.
A lot of denominations, I'm going to make kind of a controversial statement, we see a lot of denominations today that do not have Good Friday services, that bypass, or that don't put a cross in the buildings.
Right.
Why? Because we don't like death.
Right. And we don't want people to suffer. If they're coming to church, we want them to feel good.
Yeah.
That's what, again, controversial statement.
Yeah.
Church, for some people, has devolved into feeling good.
Yeah.
It's not coming to be fed, to be nourished, to be in community, to live in the suffering together. It is, I'm suffering, I want to come and you have to make me feel better.
Right.
So that when I go out, I feel good.
Well, I used a good word, devolved.
Yeah.
Because, death, the cross, it doesn't sell.
Right.
It doesn't market well. And so if the church has devolved into a coffee shop, bookstore, communal gathering place where you're meant to feel good and meet up with a friend and listen to some praise songs and go out and you're not living in the suffering of the world. You're not facing death. And I do think that's a devolving of faith. I think that it's in the Bible.
Exactly.
Right? The heart of the gospel is God using pain and suffering to bring life and healing. And no, we can't bypass that.
Right. And I want to be cautious here because I know that some people are going to go to newer churches and blame them. Or here's what I'm going to say. Some people will blame, well, that's because they went contemporary. It is not because a church is contemporary. It is not because a church speaks the language of the people. That's what contemporary is.
Right.
Contemporary is simply speaking the language of the people.
It's not a musical style.
It's not a music style. It's not any of those things. And so the church also dies when it fails to speak the language of the people. So it is possible to speak about the death of Jesus Christ. It is possible to speak about the suffering of Jesus and still put it in contemporary terms so that all people understand it, not just church people.
Right.
You know, we fall into, we're getting into the church thing here, but we fall into church speak. And when we do church speak, we really become an old church. And yeah, we need to, the language needs to be of the people.
Right. But you also talked about, coming to be fed by community and to suffer together.
Yes.
I think that's a key component of it. What we do when we gather in church is, yes, we are fed, and yes, we may feel good that we've been given the gift of life and forgiveness, that we may sing and we enjoy the music, but it's also about journeying with people, many of whom have a lot of baggage and bondage to deal with. Whether they have an ill loved one, they know someone who has died of COVID-19, they have a terminal diagnosis, they're dealing with any number of medical issues, they have lost a job, a marriage is falling to pieces.
Right.
That's the stuff of life.
Right.
That we are not meant to gloss over.
Right.
We are meant to sit in that pain, and somehow by sitting in it, by turning to it like a bronze serpent, we find life.
Right.
And I don't know how to explain how we find life in looking at it.
Right.
That's a divine mystery, but we're definitely called to sit there and look to God in the midst of death and pain.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we've become a people who, if we are suffering in some way, we don't go to church. We don't want people to see us suffering. We don't want people to see us cry. There could be shame in whatever has happened along the way. And the whole idea is that you come to church. Church should be filled with broken people.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you may be broken now, but I'm there for you when you need it. I may be broken at another time, and you're there for me when I need it. That's what community is all about. And when we stay away from each other, we don't give each other the opportunity to be that authentic community that God wants us to be.
Find healing in community.
Yes.
And find life and healing in God.
Yes.
And I think we'll wrap up with that for today. Thank you, as always, for being with us. We invite any comments, any questions that you might have. We would love to dialogue about this difficult text with you in any way that you want to connect with us. You can leave a comment on Facebook, on YouTube. You can call the office. We're always available to talk. We hope to be with you again soon. Join us tomorrow evening at 6:30 for week 3 of our midweek Lenten discussion. And until then, have a good week.